The year was 1962, and the town of Clay Hollow, Kentucky, barely made it onto most maps. A place of coal dust and old hymns, where the mornings began with the sound of distant trains and ended with the same. There was one church, one grocery, and one small red brick schoolhouse that had been standing since before the war. The school had just 6 classrooms and a dozen teachers, one of whom, Miss Eileen Carter, had been teaching there for 27 years. By all accounts, she was patient, kind, and believed every child deserved a chance to be heard. That's why, when a pale boy with gray eyes and no voice arrived one September morning, she welcomed him without question. His name, according to the transfer form, was Samuel Gray, age 9. He was small, serious, neatly dressed in clothes, a little too formal for the dusty Kentucky hills. His guardian was listed as Mr. Henry Weller, a retired miner who lived on the outskirts of town. There was no record of Samuel's parents. Miss Carter said he carried a small notebook everywhere. He never spoke, not even to say his name. Instead, he'd write single words and show them to her short, careful handwriting in blue ink. Words like yes, no, water, home. He understood everything said to him, but responded only in silence. She seated him near the window, away from the louder children, and for the first few weeks, nothing about him seemed unusual. Quiet, polite, shy, until the day the notebook changed. It happened in October, during an art assignment. The students were drawing their homes. When Miss Carter passed Samuel's desk, she saw he wasn't drawing a house at all. He'd drawn a door, a simple wooden door with a black handle, but the details were uncanny, shading so precise that it looked like a photograph. Around the frame, faint pencil marks that looked like small fingerprints. She asked what it was. Samuel didn't answer. He turned the page and began another drawing. This time, the same door, but open. Inside, darkness filled the frame, except for a single white rectangle floating in the center. Maybe a window, maybe light. At Tebotam, he wrote one word. Listen. That afternoon, when the class lined up to leave, Miss Carter noticed Samuel hadn't gone home. He was standing in the hallway, staring at the floorboards beneath the classroom door. She asked what was wrong. He wrote, "It moves?" She thought he meant a mouse or loose plank. But when she knelt to check, she realized he was on T looking at the floor at all. He was watching the space beneath the door frame, eyes wide, unblinking. It was as if he expected something to come through. The next day, Miss Carter called his guardian. No one answered. So she sent a letter. 2 days later, a man in a long coat arrived at the school. He introduced himself as Mr. Weller, thin, pale, older than she imagined. He apologized for Samuel's silence and thanked her for her patience. When she asked if the boy had always been mute, the man hesitated. And then he said something strange. He spoke once, then he wrote. Now he only draws. Before she could ask what that meant, he added, "Don't throw his notebook away. Whatever he writes. Keep Italiano." That winter was the coldest Clay Hollow had seen in a decade. Frost rimmed the schoolhouse windows by dawn, and the coal stove barely kept the chill out. Samuel came to class each day with red fingertips and the same calm silence. But his notebook was filling faster now, page after page of drawings. Some were of the school itself, desks, blackboards, the bell tower. But others were of places no one recognized. Long hallways with flickering lights, dark rooms filled with chairs turned toward corners. And always, the door drawn again and again, from every angle. When Miss Carter asked what it meant, Samuel wrote, "It listens." In early December, during morning prayers, a ceiling tile fell. It missed a student by inches. When the janitor checked the attic crawl space, he found something unexpected. A folded note, wedged between the rafters. It was written on the same paper Samuel used. In his small, perfect handwriting, it said, "There's another school upstairs." No one could explain it. The janitor said the space above was barely large enough to crawl through and empty. Still, Miss Carter began locking her classroom each night. The next Monday, Samuel didn't show up. Nor the day after. When Miss Carter called the Weller house, no one picked up. By Wednesday, she drove out there herself. The house stood at the edge of the woods, one story, with a tin roof and a broken fence. The curtains were drawn. She knocked. No answered. She knocked again, harder, until the door creaked open on its own. Inside was warmth, a faint smell of coal smoke, and silence. The living room was tidy. 2 teacups on the table, a Bible open to Psalms. But the chair by the stove was empty, and on it lay Samuel's notebook. The last page was still wet with ink. A single drawing filled it. The door again, but this time wider, the darkness spilling outward, and beneath it, written in careful block letters, "He knows you read." Miss Carter closed the book and stepped outside. The wind had changed warmer, somehow, though it carried no sound. Behind the house, she noticed footprints leading toward the trees, small ones. Barefoot, they ended at the edge of a dry creek bed. The sheriff's men searched for 2 days. They found nothing. 3 weeks later, the school received a small brown parcel addressed to Miss E.N. Curter, no return address. Inside was a new notebook, identical to Samuel's. First page blank. Second page, a message written in neat, blue ink. "You listened. Now he knows your name." The parcel sat on Miss Carter's desk until the last bell. She waited for the hallway to empty, for the coal stove to settle. Then she opened the new notebook again. First page blank. Second page, "You listened. Now he knows your name." She closed it and slid the book into her desk drawer. On the way home, she walked past the church and lit a candle without saying why. That night, she drafted a letter to the Clay Hollow School Board. A formal account of Samuel's arrival, his drawings, the attic crawl space, and Mr. Weller's visit. Before she sealed the envelope, she copied one line she could not make herself forget. "He spoke once tenable, now he only draws." She added a postscript. "If a boy arrives with a notebook and no voice, keep the notebook." The county sent Superintendent Alden Pierce 2 days later. He was a careful man who wore gray suits and shoes that didn't scuff. He listened to Miss Carter's story without interrupting, his pencil moving in small, tidy marks. When she showed him the parcel and the new notebook, he asked to keep it for a week for documentation. She hesitated, then agreed. That Friday, Pierce climbed the narrow ladder into the schoolhouse attic with a janitor and a deputy. The space ran the length of the building. Dry wood, a scatter of chalk dust. The smell of summer stored and wintered over. Between 2 rafters above Miss Carter's room, the deputy found scratches in the plank, thin and parallel, as if a child had tapped the wood with a pencil to count days. They photographed the marks and went back down. The bell for dismissal rang while they were still packing up. The sound made everyone flinch. Pierce returned the next week. He looked drawn and slept out. He set the notebook on Miss Carter's desk and said, "You're to seal your room each evening. I'll speak to the board." "Did you read it?" she asked. He swallowed. "I read enough." "What did you see?" He took a long breath. "A door," he said. In January, Mr. Weller reappeared thinner, paler. He arrived during lunch and asked to sit. He kept his cap in his hands and stared at the stove. "I'm not his blood," he said quietly, "but he's my responsibility." Miss Carter asked where Samuel was. Weller took a long time to answer. "He's where he knows how to be, inside the part of the house you don't look at." Miss Carter told him about the drawings, the note from the attic, the new notebook. When she finished, Weller turned the cap once and said, "He watches sound." "What do you mean?" "The places that listen," he said. "Corners, gaps, the low side of a door, the breathing of a room." Who taught him that? Weller's eyes lifted, surprised by the question, as if she'd stepped too close to something private. "No one. He learned it like a left-handed prayer." Before he left, he placed a folded paper on the desk. Inside was a small, careful map. A rectangle for the schoolhouse, a square for the bell tower, and a line drawn up and along between roof and ceiling, labeled in steady block letters. "The walk. Don't go up there," he said, "and don't let him lead you by pages." On a Tuesday in late January, Miss Carter unlocked her classroom and saw a second notebook lying beside the first. No envelope. No note. The cover fabric was identical. Inside, every page had a date written in the top right corner in blue ink. The coming month, day by day. The first page, Feb 1. Under the date, a floor plan of the classroom from above. Rows of desks, the window wall, the stove, the door. In the plan, a small mark sat beneath the threshold teeny, black, like a listening hole. On FAB Dost, the plan showed the same room but with one child's desk slightly out of place. On FAB 3 desks moved. On FAB 4 the bell tower sketched in the margin with a different hand. Darker, hurried, as if drawn in poor light. The dates continued until Feb 28. On that last page, the drawing changed. No floor plan. No desks. Just the door at the end of a hall. The darkness inside was not shaded. It was scratched. Hundreds of light strokes that made the paper feel almost soft. At T-bottom. One word. Come. Miss Carter put both notebooks in the drawer and locked it. That night she dreamed of the bell ringing while no one pulled the rope, the sound falling down the ladder as if poured. On February 1st, Miss Carter started a log. She wrote the time the stove was lit, the roll, the page numbers read, the assignments, every small oddness. She wrote when chalk snapped, when the window rattled, when someone asked to be excused and stood too long in the hall. At noon, a low wind came up from the south and made the eaves hum. At 12:17, a boy Billy Knox raised his hand and said he heard someone whisper his name at the door. When Miss Carter opened it, the hall was empty. The log reads, no footfalls. Floor cold. Heard a faint pencil tapping. On February 2nd, the stove went out twice. The janitor said it never did that. On February 3rd, the bell line swayed when no one had been near it. On February 4th, Miss Carter found the phrase "hush or he will hear" pressed faintly into a desktop. Not written in ink, but pressed, as if by someone tracing letters with a nail. She erased it gently with a cloth and wrote a verse on the board instead. The room felt lighter when the children read it aloud. The school board voted to keep Miss Carter's class in session but locked the attic ladder and post the deputy on the stairs. Superintendent Pierce proposed an inspection during spring recess to seal irregularities. It didn't matter. On February 8th, the deputy went out for a smoke at 3:05. When he came back 3 minutes later, he found the ladder unlatched and the attic hatch just slightly ajar. He kicked his chair and shouted. The children jumped. The deputy climbed the rungs and felt a cold breath of air come down like someone exhaling through cloth. He didn't go up. After school, Miss Carter opened her drawer to write the day's entry and found both notebooks open to FEB 9. The plan showed a room, with an extra desk in the corner near the map and Impossible 13th. At the bottom of the page in small letters, he sits when we stand. She shut the books and walked down to the church. The sanctuary was empty. She listened to the wood tick. The next morning, a substitute teacher, Mrs. Rains, took Miss Carter's class. No one told the children why. Miss Carter spent the day at the county office, answering questions for a man with a tape recorder. Do you believe the boy was being harmed? He asked. She said no. Do you believe he harmed others? She said no again, then added, he was trying to warn the room. Warn the room of what? She folded her hands. Of being overheard by itself. The man stopped the tape and sighed through his nose. Miss Carter, that isn't a thing. Isn't it? She said. So softly he wrote it down anyway. When she returned to school near dusk to gather her things, she found the second notebook open to FEB 12. The drawing wasn't a plan this time. It was a portrait weak light. Smudged graphite, a man's face in 3/4 profile. Not Weller, not the deputy, a stranger with delicate features and an old injury along the jaw. Under the sketch, Samuel had written 4 block letters, H-E-A-R. Miss Carter traced the edge of the page with her finger and felt a light burr. The pencil had torn the paper there, as if the hand that drew had been shaking. On February 14th, the bell rope tightened in the night and locked itself into a hard twist. The janitor had to cut it free. He left the length of rope coiled by the ladder like a sleeping animal. In the morning, the coil had been moved, unwound, wound again the opposite way. On February 17th, Superintendent Pierce announced by a letter that the schoolhouse would close early for winter break due to maintenance. He also enclosed a recommendation that Miss Carter take paid leave through March. She folded the letter and placed it in the first notebook, on the page with the word "listen." Then she locked the drawer and went to the window. Snow fell in lines. Across the yard, the bell tower leaned a fraction, as if the building were listening back. That afternoon, the church organist stopped by the classroom with a tin of cookies and a rumor. A small memorial was being planned. "For who?" Miss Carter asked. "For the boy," the organist said gently. "People talk. They think a thing. Then the thing becomes true if you don't say it isn't." Miss Carter thanked her for the cookies and did not go to the memorial. The last entry in Miss Carter's log is dated February 22nd, 1962, written after dark by lamplight. Her handwriting is slower in the cold. "Deputy left at 5:10. I stayed to finished grades. Heard pencil tapping above 3 times. Not mouse, not heat. Open ed drawer notebooks arranged side by side. Both open to FEB 23. Text at bottom in blue ink. Bring the bell. I will not. I will not. I will not." Under that, in smaller writing, "If a boy returns by pages, let the room answer with music, not silence." She closed the book and set down the pencil. When she stood, the floorboards near the door gave a long sigh. She whispered, "Good night, Samuel." Without meaning to, when she returned the next morning, the log was in the center of her desk, open to that page, and between the lines of "I will not," someone had written in a new, patient hand, "Then he will." No one was in the room. Spring came. The inspection sealed the attic hatch with screws the length of a carpenter's finger. The school board voted to move Miss Carter's class to the church hall temporarily. Parents were relieved. Children liked learning beneath the tall windows and the painted ceiling. It felt like summer inside. The Clay Hollow schoolhouse sat empty that month but for the janitor's visits. On the last day of March, he carried a crate of discarded copybooks to the furnace room. As he passed the base of the bell tower, he heard a thin strike above him. Once, like a fork on glass. He looked up, startled, and then grinned at himself. The bell rope knew, clean hung perfectly still. A year later, the county archived Miss Carter's log, Superintendent Pierce's notes. "If you request the materials today, you'll get white gloves and a polite nod." The first notebook opens idly, the second doesn't. The cloth along its spine swells against itself as if water once found it and then left. When you persuade it, the pages lift with a sweet powdery smell of old paper and coal smoke. The floor plans feel precise. The portrait feels older than the hand that drew it. The last page looks like a door waiting to be named. If you tilt the paper slowly under the reading lamp, you'll notice a faintness beneath the graphite, almost a watermark. A bell sketched so lightly you could miss it. In the manifest there is an additional slip. A note scrawled by a nameless clerk, decades after 1962. "During inventory, we heard tapping from the shelf while counting. Opened the Clay Hollow box. No pests." The tapping stopped when the box was open. Began again when we closed it. We moved the box to the top shelf. Tapping ceased. The clerk added a small drawing of a rectangle with a darkened center. Elaborated, the quiet part of a door. As for Mr. Weller, he died in 1965. His effects listed by the county: a cap, 3 shirts, a metal lunch pail, a Bible with underlines and psalms, and a stack of composition notebooks bound with twine. Their pages were blank. One had a single sentence on the inside cover: "A room isn't safe because it's empty. It's safe when it can't hear itself." No relative claimed the property. The house went to seed. 10 to ground. In late summer, children cut through the lot and dared each other to shout their names into the foundation stones. Most only whispered. No one ever found Samuel's birth record. A clerk in Frankfurt once thought she did. She sent a Xerox to Clay Hollow stamped with a date and the name Gray, Samuel, and an address that matched nothing. When the archivist turned the form over, she found the back fully black, overexposed, or simply dark. The letter that accompanied it said, "Return if misfiled, There was no address to return it to. Miss Carter retired in 1969. She moved to a house with windows that opened wide and a porch that stayed bright until evening. On summer nights, she wrote letters to former students and kept their replies in a cigar box. She never married. She kept a Radio 4 company, but left it unplugged. In her last years, she sorted her papers and gave some to the county. For the rest, she made a small fire in the yard and fed it slowly. A neighbor asked if she was cold. "No," she said, and smiled, just quieter with time. When she passed, the executor found one thing tucked under the bed. A schoolhouse bell clapper wrapped in cloth. No bell, just the iron tongue. It was heavy for its size. She had written on the cloth in pencil, "If he asks for the bell, give him the clapper instead. Let the room decide whether to speak." No one knows where the clapper went next. Some say the church took it. Some say the archive. Some say it's still under a bed in Clay Hollow, patient as iron. There is no official explanation for what happened in the schoolhouse that winter. The county calls it an incident without injury. The church calls it a reminder to mind the spaces where sound collects. The children who sat in Miss Carter's room, now old themselves, will tell you the same memory in slightly different words. One day it felt like the classroom was listening, and we all learned to whisper our names a little softer. When the wind moves south in February, the empty lot where the school once stood makes a sound like paper turned very carefully. If you stand by the ditch and close your eyes, you might hear tapping above you, counting. Not a threat, not a promise. A map, maybe, traced in air. If a boy arrives in a story with a notebook and no voice, keep the notebook. If he draws a door, don't open it for him. Light a candle. Read aloud. Let the room be full of music. And if you ever find a parcel on your desk, wrapped in plain paper, with your name spelled correctly in neat blue ink, open it in the sunlight. Speak your name once, clearly. Then listen to the quiet part of the door as if it could answer back. End of transcript. True Lore Archives, 2025.